Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, this man sitting to Mr. Hirschorn's side right here is the defendant, Denzel Suitt. Denzel Suitt was sworn in and took an oath down at City Hall on June 5th, 2015, and took an oath to serve and protect and uphold the laws of New Jersey and of the country, and to protect citizens of Jersey City as a Jersey City police officer. It was a solemn oath that he and 31 other officers took that day. That oath carries great responsibility. The oath means that he was charged and accepted the responsibility of protecting all citizens of Jersey City, regardless of race, wealth, lack thereof, gender, or whatever station in life he might find an individual. As a member of the Jersey City Police Department, Mr. Suitt had to undergo rigorous training, like all law enforcement officers. He went to a county academy, he learned how to write police reports, he learned how to call in events over dispatch to notify other officers where he was, what he was doing, how to participate in investigations, and most important for this trial, how to properly interact with members of the community, again, regardless of their station in life. Less than 3 years into his job as a member of the Jersey City Police Department, this defendant failed the public, failed the members, failed the citizens of Jersey City, failed his police department, violated his oath. On March 25th, 2018, Mr. Suitt and his partner, Kevin Osorio, were working the midnight tour. The defendant is assigned to the South District, and that's one of the busiest districts in Jersey City. We refer to it as the Greenville section. It's busy, it's active. There's never a lack of activity. During the midnight tour, this defendant and his partner went to what's called Bayside Park. It's a small county park in the Greenville area in the vicinity of Garfield Avenue. Mr. Suitt and his partner, in a marked patrol unit, crossed through Bayside Park, continued up to Richard Street, turned onto Bayside Terrace, which is a one-way street. Once they got to Bayside Terrace, they came across the named victim in this case. His name is Jermaine Palms. He's a lifelong Jersey City resident. He is what he is. He's in his 40s. He has prior convictions for crimes, and you will be asked to consider that in the context of this trial and his testimony. Mr. Palms was in the car as the driver, and his brother, he calls him his brother, but it's more I don't know if some of you do this, but a close family friend, you refer to them as a cousin, my brother, my sister, and they're really not a blood brother. But you'll hear about that during the course of the trial, what their actual family bond is. That night, the two of them were sitting in a motor vehicle on the dead-end street at the end of Bayside Terrace. The two of them were spending some time together because you'll hear that Mr. Palms was trying to get out of Jersey City. As I said, he was born and raised in the Greenville section of Jersey City. He was trying to move forward with his life, and he was trying to move to upstate New York. He had just borrowed approximately $600 from his aunt, who lives in East Orange. She gave him $600 in cash because he had qualified for Section 8 housing in upstate New York. He needed $600 to make the security deposit. March 25th, the night of March 24th, leading into the morning hours of March 25th, were supposed to be his last in Jersey City. He wanted to spend his last couple hours hanging out with his brother before he, Mr. Palms, and his girlfriend made the long drive up to upstate New York to start his life over. You're going to hear that after borrowing the $600 from his aunt who lives in East Orange earlier that evening, what Mr. Palms did with that money, how important that money was to him. It wasn't just $600, and you'll understand more as the trial develops what that $600 meant to him, how he stored it so that he wouldn't lose it, so that he would know where it was at all times. When Mr. Palms and his brother parked on the dead-end street, his brother, and you'll hear his brother, had been drinking that day. He's no stranger to alcohol. His brother was sitting in the front passenger seat drinking alcohol. He had an open container in the car, in the parked car. The car was parked in front of a fire hydrant. Mr. Palms was not a licensed driver. He was driving his girlfriend's car who lived a few blocks away. She was at her home. He took her car to hang out with his brother. This defendant, while on duty with his partner, approached the victim's car, asked him for license, registration, and insurance. You'll hear that Mr. Palms indicated to the officers he didn't have a valid driver's license. He had New Jersey identification, but didn't have a valid license. Mr. Palms was asked to step outside of the car. He was told to take all of his personal belongings from his pockets and put them up on top of the roof of his girlfriend's car. Mr. Palms stood facing his vehicle. His brother was still seated in the passenger seat. Denzel Suitt went through the items that were put on top of the car. You'll hear from the victim that Denzel Suitt took Mr. Palms' wallet and took a step back. His partner, Kevin Osorio, was talking to the passenger brother the entire time. And you'll hear from Officer Osorio. After Mr. Suitt was done going through the victim's wallet, he instructed the victim to get back into the car. The brother was asked to get out of the car. The brother was then told to get back in the car. The officers started to leave. They didn't issue any tickets for parking in front of a fire hydrant. They didn't issue any tickets for having open containers of alcohol. They didn't issue any tickets for driving a motor vehicle without a driver's license, nor were the victim and his brother instructed to move their car. You will hear that after an investigation, not only were no tickets given, but contrary to Jersey City Police Department policy, the stop that this man made at the end of Bayside Terrace was never radioed out over the air. So you're working the midnight tour, you make a stop on a dead-end street in Greenville, and you don't radio it to your fellow officers. Mr. Palms asked whether or not he needed to move his car, considering the fact that he was now parked in front of a fire hydrant, and he was told essentially whatever. So it wasn't that important, I guess. The officers left. Mr. Palms probably relieved that he hadn't gotten in trouble for all of the violations I just listed for you, and his brother most likely breathed a sigh of relief. His brother continued drinking, and Mr. Palms opened a beer. His brother had brought him a beer. Mr. Palms started drinking his beer, and then shortly thereafter, under 20 minutes, the brothers decided they were going to go to Communipol Avenue, also in Greenville, to go to Domino's Pizza. You're going to see video footage of what happened at Domino's Pizza. You'll see Mr. Palms driving his girlfriend's white car into the parking lot at Domino's Pizza. His brother goes inside to order the pizza. And all of a sudden, you may see Mr. Palms get out of his car and start patting himself down and bending into the car and searching on the floor and moving things around in the car. That was the moment that he realized he was missing something. His brother comes back out and they have a conversation. And he's going to tell you what that conversation entailed. He's going to describe for you And that's when he realized that the $600 that he had borrowed from his aunt in East Orange for Section 8 housing security deposit was missing. Very, very shortly thereafter, his brother called 911. And you're going to hear the 911 call. And I was embarrassed when I heard the 911 call to hear how Mr. Palms' brother was treated by the officer. You'll hear it for yourselves. They didn't get satisfaction from the 911 operator. They went back to Palms' girlfriend's house to tell her what had happened. They saw a marked patrol unit. The brother approached the marked patrol unit and tried to report it. They got no satisfaction there from the marked patrol unit. They went back to the girlfriend's house, drove their car to the Jersey City Police Department South District. You're going to see footage of what happened when they got to the South District. They weren't allowed into the South District to report what happened. Everywhere these men turned to report what had happened that night, they were turned away. Every single time. And they didn't take no for an answer. They kept on being told no, and they refused to accept it because that $600 was more important than simply $600. They refused to take no for an answer. Mr. Palms finally called at the end of the evening and requested the number to Jersey City Police Department Internal Affairs. Mr. Palms and his brother met with, and you'll hear from her, Sergeant Jocelyn Torres at the time. She's now Jocelyn Roldan. They reported what had happened. An investigation was started, a comprehensive investigation that was initiated by the Jersey City Police Department. You will hear what the sergeant did in order to identify what, if anything, happened and who, if anybody, in her police department was involved. After her investigation was complete, the investigation was then passed along to the Hudson County Prosecutor's Office, and you'll hear from somebody from my office who will describe that process. The judge just instructed you that during the course of the trial, there are many different types of evidence. Specifically, there's what we call circumstantial evidence and direct evidence. Here, we have both. You are going to hear, you're going to have to bear with me, I'm not technologically inclined, and we have a lot of DVDs that I will be trying to manage myself, and hopefully at some point have some assistance with, like, try not to get too frustrated. You're going to hear 911 calls. You're going to hear how Jermaine Palms' brother was treated by the operator. You are going to see video footage of when Jermaine Palms' brother approached the Jersey City Police Department patrol car to report what had happened. You will see, as I said, the CCTV video from outside of the South District on Bergen Avenue when they were turned away. So there are quite a number of discs that you will see. You are going to, like in all trials, be asked to put together the pieces and ask yourselves what's reasonable, what's not reasonable, what's likely, what's less likely. What Jersey City Internal Affairs felt was likely and reasonable after they did their investigation and narrowed down the pool of officers that were working the midnight tour on the night of March 25th, 2018, is that there was some truth to what Mr. Palms was saying and what his brother was saying. Following their investigation and my office taking over their investigation, Mr. Suitt was charged with having committed or violated 2 crimes under our criminal code. He was charged first with official misconduct. And I just want to read to you briefly, as the judge stated, it's my duty and my burden to present to you the evidence to prove that Denzel Suitt, his behavior that night, fits the elements as set forth under the statute. Official misconduct, the defendant has to be a public servant. Here, the public servant is a Jersey City police officer. That he or she committed an act relating to his or her office, knowing that it was unauthorized. You will hear that Denzel Suitt was in a marked patrol unit, wearing his Jersey City Police Department uniform and badge. And that his purpose that night, when he removed Mr. Palms' wallet and the money from his wallet, was solely to benefit himself. And when he did that, he knew it was wrong and he knew it was illegal. I'm paraphrasing. That's sort of the short version of official misconduct. The judge will give you the real definition, the actual definition. The other charge that he was charged and indicted for, again, it's not proof of guilt, it's just the charging document, was committing the act of theft. That he took, without permission, $600 from a man named Jermaine Palms, and that he had no right to take it, it didn't belong to him, and he had no intention of giving it back. Throughout the course of the trial, you're going to hear evidence from the witness stand from many, many witnesses. There are lay people, those are non-police officers, and there are police officers. And what I want you all to bear in mind, and I think it will be inescapable, you will be unable to ignore it, is that these people were turned away at every corner, every opportunity that they had to tell. And they told immediately that this had happened. And you give that the weight that you should give it, that you feel it deserves, that they told immediately. Every time they told, they were treated like garbage and turned away. This trial is not only Mr. Suitt's chance to get a fair trial by members of the community, his peers, but it's also Jermaine Palms' chance to tell his story and not be treated like garbage. It's his opportunity to tell you what happened and what he did to try to make it right. So I hope it's not going to be long and people won't be long-winded, but please give the defendant and Mr. Palms, finally, the patience and the attention that he deserves and that Mr. Suitt deserves. I thank you for your time and your attention, and I'm convinced that at the end of the trial, after you've heard from all of the witnesses and you've seen all the evidence, you will find that the state has met its burden, has proven all of the elements of official misconduct and theft by unlawful taking. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is Jersey City Police Officer Denzel Suitt. I knew it was good. You can call him Officer Suitt. You can call him Mr. Suitt. You can even call him Denzel if you prefer. What we cannot do here, ladies and gentlemen, is you cannot call him guilty. Because, ladies and gentlemen, when the state finishes their case and they put forth all the facts, all the evidence, and all the law, they'll simply conclude that he's not guilty. It's that simple. You heard about March 25th briefly, but on March 25th, 2018, there's no dispute. Denzel Suitt was working as a police officer in the South District of Jersey City. He was working with Kevin Osorio. I anticipate that the state's going to call Officer Osorio and he's going to tell you they were working together. There's no dispute as to that. There's no dispute that they were working in the South District. There's no dispute that they were working in South District Car 401 and they were driving around the South District that night on March 25th, 2018. Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know where y'all folks live, whether in the South District, outside of it here in Jersey City or elsewhere, but as was alluded to by Ms. Krauthamer, and I think it's fair to say, the South District is busy. Busy is kind of a code word for there's a lot of stuff going on there that police officers are going to be involved with, a lot more than a minor traffic stop for not having your driver's license or parking by a fire hydrant. For good or for bad, the Greenville section of Jersey City is a rough neighborhood, any time of day. Certainly on the midnight tour when Denzel and his partner were working. But at some point during that tour, ladies and gentlemen, they did turn onto Bayview Terrace. They did interact with Jermaine Palms and his brother, Jonathan Davis. Ladies and gentlemen, that's where this interaction and Ms. Krauthamer's version of events and what really took place kind of go in different directions. You see, at that point in time, as you had heard, Denzel was only on the job for a couple of years. And you'll hear from Officer Osorio that he was a probationary officer at that point in time, meaning he hadn't even been on for a year. So these are two young officers working a tough tour by themselves sometime after midnight in the Greenville section of Jersey City. And as you heard and was alluded to, did these two guys follow all the procedures that you have to do for Jersey City? No, you're going to hear they did. Did they do everything right that night? when they interacted with Mr. Palms and his brother? No. Did they do everything that they were taught in the academy that you should do? Like radioing other officers, as was referenced by Ms. Krauthamer? No, they didn't. Did Officer Osorio, as you're going to hear from him, fill out the log sheet properly as to whether this interaction took place or it didn't? No. I'm not sure if we're blaming Denzel for that too, but in any event, the one thing I can tell you that took place out there is that there was no crime. And certainly Denzel didn't take any money from anybody. As a matter of fact, as you heard from Ms. Krauthamer, the officers cut Mr. Palms and Mr. Davis a break. They could have issued them multiple citations: driving without a license, parking by a fire hydrant, having open containers of alcohol. But they didn't. There's nothing sinister or evil about that decision. There's nothing more to that, no motivation. What it was, as I said before, was two relatively inexperienced officers in a not-so-nice area of Jersey City, had not such a good time, who had, from their experience, had bigger problems and thought there might be bigger problems that night. They continuing to deal with two gentlemen who they were told were there for a last night in Jersey City. Now, Ms. Krauthamer referenced what Mr. Palms and his brother did after this interaction. And you're going to hear from Mr. Palms, I anticipate, how much this money meant to him, and how important it was, and how he needed this to move out of Jersey City. I don't know how important it was to him. I know that he signed a promissory note for his aunt for it. Seems a bit bizarre to me, but she made him sign it. Maybe he's not good with money. Maybe he lost it. Maybe he spent it on something, because you're going to hear that him and his brother had gone somewhere before that. Maybe he spent the money. Maybe he was embarrassed. I don't know. But it wasn't taken from him. Now, it seems like, as Ms. Krauthamer referenced, and she's had more of an opportunity through her office to listen to and speak to Mr. Palms and his brother than I have. Maybe they were relieved and happy, and maybe that's why they sat in the car, didn't check the wallet there, didn't think, or maybe they did think it was odd that Officer Suitt was going through his wallet, but he just put it back in his pocket, had a beer, waited 20 minutes, drove to Domino's, and then he realizes that he's missing his money. Well, it's a bit strange. I don't know about you all. Unfortunately, I've had the experience of being pulled over by a police officer. I'm sure some of you have, I hope at least, unless I'm just the only one. But if an officer went through my wallet, I think, and I had $600, I would think that the first thing I would do is look for the money when he left. That didn't happen here. But you see, it wasn't just because of that that Mr. Palms and Mr. Davis thought they cut a break, As was alluded to or referenced by Ms. Krauthamer, these two guys have had their run-ins with the Jersey City Police. And they've had their run-ins for things a lot more serious than driving without a license and parking by a fire hydrant. You see, they both spent time in state prison over things that took place with the Jersey City Police. So, is their word, is their credibility certainly at issue for you, ladies and gentlemen, to decide how important it is or how it affects their credibility that they have this experience and this past. And you'll hear more about it when they're take the witness stand and testify. But at this point, ladies and gentlemen, let me just take a break from the facts of the case and discuss two important principles of law that have been referenced by the judge that it wouldn't be fair to Mr. Suitt or you, ladies and gentlemen, if I didn't take the opportunity to explain them. They're so basic to our criminal justice system that I feel they need to be addressed. And the first one of that is the presumption of innocence. What the presumption of innocence says, ladies and gentlemen, is that a defendant, here Denzel, has to do absolutely nothing. As the judge said, he asked if we were going to give an opening statement. He will ask if we're going to ask witnesses questions. You see, Mr. Suitt doesn't have to do anything, and certainly I don't have to do anything on his behalf. We can just sit there and mind our business until this ends. As a matter of fact, Mr. Suitt doesn't even have to be in this room. And if the state, or when the state, I should say, doesn't prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt, you have to vote not guilty. That's what the presumption of innocence is. That's what our presumption of innocence says in our great system here. The other principle of law, ladies and gentlemen, is beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, the state, as Ms. Krauthamer referenced and the judge has said, has to prove their case beyond any reasonable doubt in your mind. What is reasonable doubt? Well, it'd be a lot easier if this was a civil case to explain and say it's a little more than 50-50, it's 75. We can't really put a percentage on it. So the best way to explain it is reasonable doubt is a doubt, and I apologize for reading this to you, but I don't want to mess it up. Reasonable doubt is a doubt based upon reason and common sense after careful and impartial consideration of all the evidence you hear in this trial. It's the kind of doubt that would make a reasonable person hesitate to act. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt, therefore, must be proof of such a convincing character that a reasonable person would not hesitate to rely upon it. So, ladies and gentlemen, the state's burden is to leave you no doubt that their evidence proves this case against Denzel. By the end of the testimony in this case, you'll see that the state's case is full of doubt, full of reasonable doubt. As you sit through this trial, I ask you a couple of things. One is to use your common sense. Two is to not only listen to what is said, or not only watch what you do see, but to think about what you don't see or hear. I can tell you what you're not going to hear. You're not going to hear anybody say that they saw Denzel take this money out of this wallet. If you do, I can tell you that for 2 years, no one said that. Not to Jersey City when they went to internal affairs, as was referenced, not to the Hudson County Prosecutor's Office, at no point in time. So you're not going to hear anybody say that they saw Officer Denzel Suitt take money. You're not going to hear that at some point in time after this interaction that there was some big conversation between Denzel and his partner, Kevin Osorio, about what took place. As a matter of fact, you're going to hear from Osorio that this wasn't even some big deal, that they thought they cut these guys a break and moved on. You're not going to hear that Denzel was in the car and was acting differently, the police car this is, or was fidgeting around, or went somewhere and spent a bunch of money. You're not going to hear, or see, this interaction. I submit, as Ms. Krauthamer has said, she's going to show you videotapes of the cars driving into Bayview Terrace, the cars driving out for times. These gentlemen at Domino's Pizza. Ladies and gentlemen, there's a camera at the end of Bayview Terrace. There's a light rail station right there. These officers worked in the South District every night. Denzel knew the camera was there. Do you think that he went to Bayview Terrace after going through the academy, after doing all the things that Ms. Krauthamer talked about, less than 3 years on the job, went to the end of a block where he knew there was a camera and took money out of somebody's wallet, put it back on the car, and drove off like nothing happened? That's what the state's asking you to believe, and it's just not believable. But you're not going to see that. So, ladies and gentlemen, just in conclusion, I thank you for your time and your patience. We all have an awesome responsibility here. Your responsibility is more awesome than mine. You see, you took an oath when you took those seats to sit in judgment in this case. And at the end of the trial, you're going to conclude that Officer Denzel Suitt is falsely accused of a crime, 2 serious felonies. As I said, you all asked for this responsibility. You had the opportunity to be excused. Maybe you're regretting that now, but you had the opportunity to be excused. You all said you would be fair when we began. Denzel and I trusted in you then, and we'll trust in your verdict at the end of this trial. And we trust that that verdict will be one of not guilty.